OFM, DFM has faced challenges which have either slowed down delivery or indeed resulted in complete deadlock. We should not feel embarrassed about such an outcome. If you were to legally compel diverse parties to form an executive anywhere in the world, the very same problems would surface, though I suspect we have probably reached more agreement than would be the case elsewhere. Of course, I am frustrated by delays with a range of issues, the CSI strategy included. The Lord Mayor expressed her frustration at the continuing delay to the publication of that strategy. I agree, and especially so as we believed, having approved an OFM DFM that last autumn, we would share a document worked up by officials with key stakeholders, that we were 99% agreed on the strategy, only to find Sinn Féin resigning from this position and wanting to start again from scratch. I'm not suggesting that it is only the DUP who are frustrated by delays. We know Sinn Féin has expressed disappointment at the pace of devolving policing and justice functions. In light of the difficulties faced by this executive, and indeed the last one, I think it is reasonable to ask the question whether the arrangements can be improved to better meet the challenges we face. Having operated them for over 2 years, I believe they can. Parties that are ideologically opposed on a whole range of issues are always going to have issues where they have fundamental differences. It's not always going to be possible to reach an accommodation, and as a result of our voting system, a failure to agree means deadlock. This has been the case on a number of issues. Modest changes to the arrangements could make significant improvements and help to normalise politics in Northern Ireland. Later this month, my party will publish detailed proposals for developing devolution. But today I want to give you a preview. Learning from experience, our proposals offer a simple and sensible step forward which could significantly enhance the operation of the Executive and Assembly without prejudice to long-term or permanent arrangements. They are about making government work better and should not be a cause for concern for any Democrat who believes good decision-making and delivering for the community is a priority. At the heart of our proposals will be the abolition of community designation in the Assembly. As a consequence of this, new voting arrangements for the Assembly and the Executive will be required. As a moral and practical matter, community designation is fundamentally flawed. It is deeply undemocratic, it entrenches community division, and hinders the development of normal politics in Northern Ireland, and in practice means that the votes of all Assembly members are not equal. While in its initial months, the designation provision was seen as a way of safeguarding either section of the community against harmful decisions promoted by the other, it is clear there are other ways to provide community protection without being faced with the negative offspin. In place of community designation, we propose the introduction of weighted majority voting, where a cross-community vote is required by legislation or triggered by a petition of concern. A proposal would require the support of 65% of Assembly members present and voting in order to pass. 65% of Assembly members present and voting would mean that to be passed, any proposal would need to have widespread support across the community, but would not permit a small minority, particularly a one-party minority, to frustrate the will of what would be a strong cross-community majority. It would mean that no single political party would have the capacity to block proposals which otherwise would command widespread support. And crucially, 65% would allow various combinations of parties to form a coalition to pass a particular proposal. This would increase the relevance of all Assembly members and would encourage cooperation and compromise between all of the parties. No single party could then hold others to ransom, as their approval was not required for a proposal to pass. Different coalitions could be formed on different issues to provide the required majority. Neither Sinn Féin nor the DUP alone would have a veto, but support from both sections of the community would still be required. In the Executive, where a cross-community vote is required, parties would vote on the basis of their strength in the Executive, in the Assembly. An associated amendment to the Ministerial Code would require the First Minister and Deputy First Minister within a reasonable period to table and permit a vote at the Executive on any matter proposed by any minister. Consequential amendments would also be required to other matters which are predicated on community designation or cross-community voting to bring them into line with the new arrangements. Changing the voting system cannot be done overnight, but I would like to see a different approach taken to decision making at the Executive as soon as possible. For some time, the Ulster Unionist Party and the SDLP have complained about how executive business has been handled and that they have been marginalised. At the same time, Ulster Unionist and SDLP ministers have been less than responsible in how they have approached executive business. But rather than apportioning blame, I want to find a solution. That's why, pending the introduction of any new measures, and as a gesture to the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP, I believe we should consider requiring unanimity at the Executive in order to pass decisions. While no party will be allowed to frustrate the commitments the Executive has made in the Assembly in its programme for government, in circumstances where the Ulster Unionist Party and SDLP make a good faith effort to work constructively on matters in the Executive, DUP ministers would insist that all decisions will only be taken by consensus, and we will not use our votes to override their opposition. Indeed, to make this participation really meaningful, I will ensure that SDLP and Ulster Unionist ministers have a greater role in relation to executive business. I cannot speak for the Deputy First Minister, but I am prepared, if they wish, to meet with the UUP and SDLP ministers in advance of each executive meeting, and to make arrangements so that their special advisers are fully consulted and involved in the process. The success of this approach will depend on the resolve of ministers, but I want to give everyone the opportunity to play the fullest possible role in the Executive. Some have argued that the SDLP and UUP's present opposition mode in the Executive is tactical and cynical. However, both parties say they want to make a full contribution to the Executive's work. This allows them the opportunity to do so, and time will tell. Plenty of challenges lie ahead for us all in the years to come, but I believe that Northern Ireland has changed unalterably for the better in the few years that have just passed. And the challenges that we face in the future will be different than those that we have faced in the past. In the last few weeks, the world has been focusing on the life and times of the Kennedy family. It was Robert Kennedy who said, "We will not find answers in old dogmas by repeating outworn slogans or fighting on ancient battlegrounds against fading enemies long after the real struggle has moved on." He said, "We ourselves must change to master change. We must rethink all our old ideas and beliefs before they capture and destroy us." When considering how we govern ourselves in Northern Ireland, I think that we should remember those words, but we should never lose sight of the fact that today, despite all of our differences, we have a more peaceful society than in decades. That's an achievement that I believe none of us will want to give up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, First Minister. Our second speaker, Jack McConnell, member of the Scottish Parliament. Jack is Scotland's longest-serving First Minister. As we were getting our devolution re-established in May 2007, Jack was stepping out from that role following the election. Now he has been anything but unbusy in